This is The Pulse. Two 12-year-olds have been identified as vandals who set fire in a church in Massachusetts. What do you get when two kids come together to set fire in a church? Apparently, you get off scot-free. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to run as an independent. Where does he stand on the issues? He's running, he's standing, he doesn't know what to do. Only thing he's not doing so far is walking. What kind of a president will he be? Settled science? Anthropologists don't know the difference between men and women. They also don't know the difference between anthropology and common sense. And finally, Synod Cardinal speaks on LGBTQ Catholics and those who love the traditional Latin Mass, because those two camps are usually discussed together. This is The Pulse. Here we go. Welcome to The Pulse by the Catholic Adventurer, here on X and throughout many and varied distribution channels. I am, you guessed it, the Catholic Adventurer. You'll find me on X at @ForTheQueenBVM. You'll find me on Facebook at Catholic Adventurer. Thank you very much for joining me. The Pulse is basically a short little podcast about news headlines. I'm going to read some articles, some headlines. I might only read the headlines sometimes. Sometimes, as today, I'll be reading the articles themselves, or at least portions of them, and giving you my comments, my commentary on what I'm reading. I'm going to have a few wild ones set up for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of kids who should be hauled off in a paddy wagon and sent to the clink for setting fire inside of a church. We're going to be talking about some truly, truly unbelievable comments made by Cardinal Tobin of Newark, New Jersey, regarding LGBTQ plus people and the other marginalized group of the Catholic Church, traditional Latin Mass goers. Also, I don't know if you got the message, but anthropologists don't know how many genders there are. We're going to get into that as well. Again, this is The Pulse by the Catholic Adventurer. Find me on X at @ForTheQueenBVM. You'll find my website at catholicadventurer.blog. Let's get to it. First, from Catholic News Agency, two 12-year-olds identified as vandals in Massachusetts church fire. Written by Joe Bakuras. Two 12-year-olds were identified by police Sunday as suspects in the vandalism of a Massachusetts Catholic church, which included fire being set to an altar cloth, a tabernacle cloth, and the lectionary. The two juveniles, a boy and a girl, will not face any charges at this time. In case the signal broke up for you, let me read that part again. The two juveniles will not face any charges at this time. On October 6th, police and fire authorities responded to a call from St. John the Evangelist in East Bridgewater after smoke was reported at about 3:30 p.m. The pastor discovered the fire after smelling smoke. Investigators on the scene determined that there was a fire around the altar that had been put out with a fire extinguisher. Let me fast forward for a second. Father Paul Ring, pastor of the church, told CNA Monday that vandalism is, quote, disturbing, end quote, especially because of the sacred objects that the juveniles chose to set on fire. He goes on to say, quote, it wounded a community, end quote. Ring said he wants the 12-year-olds to understand how serious this was, adding that the altar, quote, our family table was desecrated. Number one, I don't like the our family table part. Okay, that's the end of the article. Let me give you my thoughts. Ring said that he wants the 12-year-olds to understand how serious this was. How are they going to understand how serious this was if they're not even being punished? I'll leave a link to this article with this post in the description, in the show notes on my website, wherever you're finding this. There will be something there with a link to these stories. So how are they learning how serious this is when they're not even being punished? Are they even getting a slap on the wrist? And frankly, a slap on the wrist is not only is it not enough, but it's detrimental because it gives them the idea that this is not serious at all. It's naughty at worst. At most, it's naughty, but it's not very serious. I don't understand how we're putting kids right, in right order, when there are no consequences for real wrongdoing. I understand going the mercy direction. I understand that. I'm not saying that they literally should be hauled off in a paddy wagon and sent to the clink. But who knows? Maybe 24 hours in a jail cell at the local precinct or local police station might do them some good. Or maybe they need to do community service. Or maybe they need to pay a serious fine that they have to work off. I don't know. but no punishment at all? I'm sorry. You're just doing those children harm. Next up, I want to get to this because I'm going to get to the juicy stuff last. We got a couple of juicy stories last. This one I found kind of interesting. You may not. Depends on where you stand politically. From Catholic News Agency, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to run as an independent. Where does he stand on the issues? Folks, I really want you to read this whole story. I'm just going to read portions of it, but I do want to give you my thoughts on this man. Let me get to the story first. Written by Peter Pinedo. Again, that's Catholic News Agency. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a Catholic and lifelong Democrat, announced on Monday that he has left the Democratic Party and is running as an independent to unseat Joe Biden as President of the United States. Pause. How on earth is Joe Biden running for re-election for president? How does that even happen? How does he even think he has the poll numbers or approval numbers to justify that bad decision? And, frankly, isn't he tired? The President of the United States has got to be one of the hardest jobs in the world. To be the commander-in-chief, that has to be one of the toughest jobs in the world. Pick any president you choose in the past, 50 years. Look at their picture when they were first inaugurated, and then see what they look like at the end of their term. Even if they only served one term, 4 years, you can see very apparent aging. You can see they look like they've been worn out, even after 4 years. After 8 years, even more so. It's a really trying job. If you look at President Barack Obama's picture, George W. Bush's picture, George H.W. Bush, whoever, you can see that they're really worn down at the end of their term. Joe Biden was already an old man when he took office. I can't believe he thinks he has it in him for another 4 years, and we're only 3 years into his first term. And he thinks he can finish out this term and still have enough left in the gas tank to do another 4 at his age? You know why I think that is? Here's why I think that is. Because he's not really the president of the United States. Let me correct that. He is the president of the United States, but he's not actually running the ship. I think there is someone or a group of someones who are actually doing the work, and all he's doing is sitting in the chair eating ice cream. Chocolate chip, thank you very much. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is what I really believe. Because at his age, with apparent declining mental capacity, or I guess cognitive faculty, we have to put it nicely, cognitive faculty. At his age and with his mind going, and it is, if it isn't gone, it's definitely going, and it's way down the tracks. I can't imagine that he has enough energy and vitality to complete this term and then to do another 4. Unbelievable. If he thinks he can square that, it's only because for the past 3 years, he hasn't been working at all. He's in a retirement home called the White House. I don't know that for a fact. That's just my theory. I strongly believe it. You would only think you have enough energy for another 5 years of this crap if you've already not been working for the past 3 years of your term. That's what I think. The article continues. Speaking outside Philadelphia's Independence Hall, a beautiful place, I must say. That's me. That's not the article. Speaking outside of Philadelphia's Independence Hall, Kennedy, 69, gave his announcement speech to a crowd of several thousand, more than 700 and more than 750 live stream viewers. Despite his deep familial ties to the party, Kennedy has been very critical of modern Democrats and has opposed aspects of their platform. Let me fast forward a bit. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a quote from him. Getting us to hate each other is all part of the scam. Our nation's renewal is going to begin when we start to treat each other with respect. I believe he means that. I really believe he means that. That has been his rhetoric, and that does reflect his behavior even before he was running for president. So I do believe that. During the speech, Kennedy, the nephew of the first Catholic president in United States history, not that that matters, Joe Biden's a Catholic too, but whatever. Back to the article. Pledged that as an independent president, he would be a servant only to, this is a quote, a servant only to my conscience, my Creator, and to you, end quote. Here's what he has said about some key issues, blah, blah, blah. I strongly suggest that you give this a read and find out where he stands on the issues. I'm going to be honest with you. I found him to be very interesting. I follow him on X. I've listened to some of his speeches. I find him to be a very interesting person. I was really open to voting for him, but I probably won't. He leans still too left for me on abortion, on pot smoking. I still don't think that should be legal. So, sorry, I'm not down. That's strike one and strike two. I forget what the strike three was that I discovered a couple of months ago, but I probably won't be voting for him. What I do like about him is he does seem fair and balanced. He is a Democrat at heart. His policies are very, liberal, but we're talking classical liberal. John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, even Bill Clinton was more of a classical liberal. Bill Clinton today would be almost considered conservative. I mean, the Bill Clinton of the 90s. He would be considered conservative today. He doesn't like the game, RFK Jr. He doesn't like the political game. I do believe everything he said, getting us to hate each other, is all part of the scam. True, I agree, and I think he believes that. Our nation's renewal is going to begin when we start to treat each other with respect. I like that too, and I do believe he really means that. I like where he stands on lockdowns and mandates, vaccine mandates. He's against them. He seems very kind of like libertarian in some ways, which I like. A little too far left on abortion and a couple of other things. Where he stands on LGBTQ issues, I think is not bad, not great, not bad. Regarding LGBTQ plus ideology being taught in schools, Kennedy said that though transgender persons should be respected, I agree, he believes parents need to have the final say about what's taught to their children in schools. See, I like that. There's things that he's a little left on, but I can tolerate. Things that he's really left on that I just can't tolerate. But you be the judge. Don't go by what I'm saying. You be the judge. But then there are some things that are kind of square and balanced. You know, today they'd be considered conservative, but they're really not. They're just kind of down the line. You know, they just respect reality and truth. So I'm going to place a link to this in the show notes / description, wherever you're finding this, and take a look. Taking a break from the action, just a reminder, if you're not already doing so, please follow me on X at @ForTheQueenBVM. I'm going to tell you why I'm pushing this so hard. I applied to have subscriptions on my feed. I don't think it's going to go very well. I already have paid subscriptions on my Substack, CatholicAdventurer.substack.com. And I have presently zero people and have subscribed to me on Substack. I suspect 0 to 2 people will subscribe to me on X. But I really hope you get on board. I mean, I'm very active on X. I'm very active on the platform. I try to post a lot of inspiring things, edifying things, informative things, entertaining things. I'm really very active on there, and you're missing a lot if you're not following me there. I'm so active on Facebook. So active. So, not so, so. I'm so active on Facebook. I'm really very active on X because it's the free speech platform. So if you're not following me, you truly are missing a lot. And also, if you're not following me, you're not going to be able to subscribe if X approves my subscriptions application. The subscriptions feature or platform on X will basically be my current feed on steroids. It'll be longer, deeper posts. It will be a subscriber-only podcast taking you on a deep dive into Catholicism, into theology. I'm going to try to have interviews with interesting and notable people, not superstars because everybody else is already doing that. I'm talking about more important things, good confessors who can talk about the sacrament and their experience as confessors, people who are part of the chain, the mechanism that makes saints, things like that. A deep dive into Catholicism, not a meandering through, Catholic celebrity. That's not what I do. It's not what I'm interested in. It's not what I do. So you will be missing a lot if you're not subscribing. But if you're at least just following me for free, you're also getting a lot. So for the Queen, BVM on Twitter. You can also subscribe to me on Substack, CatholicAdventurer.substack.com, because basically what I do on Twitter, I will be mirroring to Substack. I will probably put a little bit more on Twitter, but what I'm posting on Twitter, I'll be also posting on Substack. So you can subscribe to one or the other. Subscriptions are $5 on Substack. They will be $5 on X if my application is approved. Okay, enough chatter. Let's get down to the juicy stuff. Still want to talk about anthropologists not knowing how many genders there are, and I want to talk about these ridiculous, just crazy statements by Cardinal Tobin. Let's go to the National Catholic Register. National Catholic Register, an excellent publication, and they did not pay me to say that. Quote, settled science, ? Anthropologists don't know the difference between men and women. This is a commentary on NC Register, written by Jennifer Roback Morse and Betsy looks like Karekis. I'm sure someone's going to email me or call me and say, it's pronounced Karekis, stupid. I know that call or that email is coming any second now. The American Anthropological Association, try saying that with a microphone in front of your face. The American Anthropological Association recently rejected a proposed session from its annual meeting. The board released a statement titled, No Place for Transphobia in Anthropology. Session pulled from annual meeting program. That's actually what they called it. The board released a statement titled, No Place for Transphobia in Anthropology. Session pulled from annual meeting program. That's what they call. So if you thought LGBTQ ABC XYZ LMNOP was bad, now we have no place for transphobia in anthropology. Session pulled from blah, blah, blah. Whew. The removed session was called Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. Why biological sex remains a necessary analytic category in anthropology. This incident is one of a growing number of instances in which ideology trumps the free exchange of ideas, open inquiry, and the scientific method itself. Let me pause for a second. This is going to sound like a commercial, but it is not. It's relevant to the point. This week, I'm going to record an episode of the Dialogue podcast with Cal Kane. If you don't know what that is, follow us on X at the Dialogue FM. We're going this week to talk, we're going to take a little break from beating each other around from the debate, and we're going to talk about something interesting, health and fitness. One of the things I plan to bring up is the politics and, I guess, anti-science disposition of the fat phobia that you and I grew up with. Don't eat fat. Fat will kill you. Fat. There's a problem with that logic. And I'm going to talk a little, I'm not going to make it a lecture, but in that episode, in that show, I'll be talking a little bit about where this fat phobia came from. But one of the things that I'll mention related to that is the fact that scientists, many of them, did not like this anti-fat messaging that was brewing in, I don't know, I'll have to check just to research and make sure I have this right, but it was around the 40s or 50s. A lot of scientists were not on board with this anti-fat messaging. And they were shouted down, shamed into non-existence. They were not allowed to say this. They were not allowed to include science into this report. The narrative was fat is dangerous, fat will kill you. And there were many scientists who were not allowed to say that is not scientifically rooted. So this is something that we deal with. Forget about COVID. COVID was not the first time we saw this, where any scientist or doctor saying something that was not in accord with the party line was basically shot in the proverbial head or proverbially shot in the head. That's not the first time this has happened. And now you're seeing another instance of it again. Back to the article. This incident is one of a growing number of instances in which ideology trumps the free exchange of ideas, open inquiry, and the scientific method. The AAA, that sounds much better than American Anthropological Association. The AAA, the AAA stated the session was rejected because it relied on assumptions that run contrary to the settled science in our discipline, namely that sex and gender are binary. Such efforts contradict scientific evidence. Really? Folks, is there really no scientific evidence that gender is binary? Now, don't tune out yet, because I'm going to get very deep for me. Whether or not it's deep from your point of view, you be the judge. I'm going to get very deep here in a second, and I'm going to apply what we're talking about here to the next story, Cardinal Tobin, okay? So don't tune me out yet. In fact, really, really focus. This is back to the commentary, by the way. In the face of a statement like that, it is fair to ask, what settled science? What kind of scientific evidence are we talking about exactly? Anthropology is the study of humans throughout history. Did these anthropologists all of a sudden find out that Lucy was transgender or non-binary? No. For as long as life has been studied, there have been two and only two sexes in all mammal species. That's enough from the article. Now, here's what's going on. Gender is not fluid, but gender is diverse, or it's possessed of diversity, I guess you could say. For example, not all boys like sports. I'm a boy. I don't like sports. I like boxing. I like baseball. And that's pretty much it. I can watch soccer, but I'm not in love with it. If I'm in a pub or something and soccer is playing, I can look at it and enjoy it. But I'm not in love with it. I'm not turning it on at home. I don't like sports. You know what I do like? Art. I like dance. I can't dance, but I like to watch it, especially ballroom dancing, classical dancing, flamenco, stuff like that. Love to watch. Dance to me is art with the human body. It's poetry in motion. That's not, obviously there are lots of guys who are dancers, guys who like dance, right? Obviously. But generally, boys like sports, girls like dance, right? That's kind of the expected model. Not all girls like to play with dolls. Some girls like to beat up boys. Some girls like to play in the mud. Some girls like to play softball, and so on. Not all girls like pretty things. Not all boys like rough things. Gender is diverse, or it's possessed of diversity. The two genders are not really cookie cutter, right? There are some things that are very typical masculine in myself, right? Typical male things. Some good, some not so good. But I don't quite fit in a mold. I don't like a lot of things that men generally like, and men generally like them for reasons I do not understand. I cannot understand being a football fan. I'm sorry, I don't get it. I have been trying since the 80s to like football. I just cannot. And I don't understand how anybody can, but I respect that others can. I respect that I'm the exception, not the rule. I get it. I respect it, and that's fine. There are women in my family who were the biggest tomboys when we were growing up. The biggest tomboys, a couple of them literally would beat up boys. One of them beat up a grown man. You want to talk about a tomboy. And today they're the most demure ladies you have ever met. Well, maybe not demure, but they're very, very ladylike, you know. Gender is not, it is set in stone, but it's not really cookie cutter. There's diversity in gender, but there are only two of them. So there's two truths for you. Number one, there are two genders. Number two, gender is diverse. What is untrue is that gender is fluid. It's true that gender expression can have varying characteristics. We can say that safely. But it is untrue that gender is fluid. There are only two of them. And what you're born with, that's what you are. And I'm not talking about genitals. The body is a sign that signifies your gender. It signifies something that's unseen. The body is not your gender. It signifies what it is. And the two, your gender and your body, are always in line. So when I say what you're born with is what you are, I'm talking about your gender, the unseen part of you, right? The spiritual, unseen part of you. It's in your DNA, your chromosomes and all that. Yes, but it's more than that. It's deeper than that. So what you're born with is what you are. It's what you have. It's what you've got. It's who you are. There's just two of those, two genders. But gender is diverse. So what people are doing today is they are rooting a falsehood in something that is true. Or let me reverse it. They are borrowing from something true to legitimize and validate something that is false, something that is a lie. It is true that gender is diverse. They don't say that, but they will say things like, I always knew, let's say it was a biological male who says, I always knew I was really a female because, and I'm making this up, but the rhetoric goes to the point, I always liked playing with trucks, not dolls. I didn't like wearing dresses. I just always identified more with the boys. I felt like I was one of them. Well, these things happen. Listen, when I was a young boy, I identified more with old women. I don't, if I had an hour, I could probably analyze it and tell you why, but I really don't know why right now at this moment. But I always felt most at home with old women. I didn't spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with old women, but I always felt most at home in their company, listening, learning, having conversations. Old men too, and by old I mean like my grandparents' age. But that didn't mean I was an old woman trapped in a young boy's body, right? So they borrow from something that is true, the diversity intrinsic to gender, or to gender expression, you might say. They borrow from something that is true to create, to manufacture, or to verify, or to validate something that is false. Gender is fluid. Some people are born in the wrong bodies or in the wrong gender. That is false. They borrow from something true to validate something that is false. Now let's get to the last story. And this one I just cannot believe. From Catholic News Agency, Synod Cardinal speaks on LGBTQ. By the way, I think they forgot a letter here. LGBTQ plus. I think they forgot one. Didn't they add an A? Didn't somebody add an A somewhere? LGBTQ. I think somebody added an A at some point. I kind of recall hearing an A. You know, when I was a kid, that was LGBT. I think it was LGB. And then they added the T, and then they added the Q. Now I think they've added an A. So CNA is obviously homophobic. Synod Cardinal speaks on LGBTQ plus. I'm sorry. They put the plus in there to leave out everybody else, or so that they don't leave out anybody else. But then they keep adding letters. Why don't you just say speaks on, and I don't mean CNA, I mean whoever comes up with these acronyms or letters or whatever. Why not just say L plus instead of LGBTQ plus? Anyway, that's just me. Synod Cardinal speaks on LGBTQ plus Catholics and those who love the traditional Latin Mass. He speaks on LGBTQ plus Catholics and those who love the traditional Latin Mass. If you think the headline is bizarre, wait till you get to the article. Again, I encourage you to read the entire article, but I'm going to read you a portion of it and tell you my thoughts. Written by Walter Sanchez Silva. The Archbishop of Newark, Cardinal Joseph Tobin, responded to two questions about how the Church welcomes Catholics from the LGBTQ plus community and about how it treats the faithful who love the traditional Latin Mass. At the Tuesday, October 10th press conference on the Synod on Synodality, another mouthful, at the Vatican, the Cardinal responded to a question about those who feel excluded from the Church, which the working document mentions, such as divorced persons who marry without an annulment and people who identify as LGBTQ plus. Got to be very careful, very deliberate with that one. LGBTQ plus. You almost have to talk like Siri to get that one out. The Synod on Synodality was convened in October 2021 under the theme, quote, for a synodal church, communion, participation, and mission, end quote. Fast forwarding a little bit, responding to a question posed by an Italian journalist, the Cardinal recalled that a few years ago, he received, this is a quote, a pilgrimage of people who felt marginalized due to their sexual orientation, LGBTQ plus people, in the cathedral. I couldn't stay for the whole service because I had other commitments as well, but I welcomed them. Well, that's good. One of my auxiliary bishops, a Cuban American, had a wonderful reflection after I gave the initial welcome. He said, "We have a beautiful cathedral, probably the most beautiful in North America." Bishop his name is Manuel Cruz, Bishop Manny said, This is a wonderfully beautiful place, but it's most beautiful when the doors are open, he continued. So I think, and now this is back to the Cardinal, so I think the real beauty of our Catholic Church is clear. When the doors are open and welcoming, when the doors are open and welcoming. And it is my hope that the Synod will help us to do that in a more significant way. Okay, in a second, we're going to get to his thoughts on TLM, so-called TLM Catholics, which I hate that term. In a second, we're going to get to that. My first thought, you're going to think it's insignificant, but it's not. One of my auxiliary bishops, a Cuban American. Who gives a damn that he's Cuban American? You know who gives a damn that he's Cuban American? Racist people. Racist people. Only a racist person would even think to include that this auxiliary bishop is Cuban. A Cuban American. Who cares? Who cares? What is he offering commentary on his experience at the Babalu Club? Who cares that he's Cuban? What does it bring to this conversation that he's Cuban? Nothing. Is he talking about political persecution in Cuba? Okay, then you say he's a Cuban American because that's relevant. It's pertinent to something. Or is he talking about immigration? Okay, he's a Cuban American. Is there any other context in which you would call out the fact that this cardinal or this bishop, this auxiliary bishop, is of Cuban descent? Is this supposed to add shine to this cardinal and what he's saying? That he was conscientious enough to point out that this auxiliary bishop is a Cuban American? I'm sorry, I just think it's so stupid. My second thought, this again from the auxiliary bishop, Bishop Manuel Cruz. We have a beautiful cathedral, probably the most beautiful in North America. This is a wonderfully beautiful place, but it's most beautiful when the doors are open. My friends, where are the doors closed to gay people? Where does a church exist where there's someone outside asking people to show their identification as straight Catholics or straight white Catholic? Where does that church exist? I would like to know, because I will show up there with a protest party. To my knowledge, and I've been to churches all over the place, to my knowledge, that church does not exist. No one has ever asked me for my identification. I have not witnessed anyone being asked for identification, either a hard ID card or simply a statement that says, yes, I am a straight white American Catholic. Where does that church exist? I know what he's trying to say, but first of all, what he's trying to say is rooted in fantasy anyway. But what he's trying to say is that the church as an organism, as an institution, is perceived as being not welcoming. Again, I don't see that, but okay. That's what he's trying to say. But he's using the, I guess, analog of a church to illustrate that point, and it just doesn't work. The church is I know what he's saying. The church, the Holy Catholic Church, is beautiful, but it's more beautiful when all kinds of people are present. I actually agree with that. Gay, straight, black, white, men, women, brown, fudge ripple. I don't care. I don't care the color, orientation, I don't care. It is more beautiful that way. It is. But we are all called to the same gospel. Turn away from sin, be faithful to the gospel. Nowhere did Jesus say, turn away from sin. And then he left out the be faithful to the gospel. He did not say, ... blank space. Moment of silence. Be faithful to the gospel. No. Turn away from sin, be faithful to the gospel. And we all receive that call, all of us. And we must live what we believe. If we believe he is the Son of God, if we believe in the gospel, then we must live what we believe. Turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. That's true for gay people, straight people, LGBTQ LMNOP people, and plus. It's true for all those people plus. That's true for everyone. I don't think, and you feel free to leave a comment and let me know, I don't think we're really seeing churches ostracizing gay people. I really don't think we're seeing that. So the cardinal is using this example of a church building, the cathedral in this case, to illustrate how beautiful the Holy Catholic Church is. And I agree. I agree. And he's saying it's even more beautiful when everybody is welcome here. But everybody is welcome here. Everybody is welcome here. So what is he talking about? Is he saying, well, not everyone is welcome because some people don't feel welcome? Well, now he's taking something true and fabricating something that is false. Remember what we talked about a moment ago? He's taking, if that's what he's saying he's taking something that is true and manufacturing something that is false. Because they feel excluded by doctrine, they are effectively excluded. That is not true. That is not true. Talk that one to death. Let's get to what Tobin says about TLM Catholics, so-called TLM Catholics. Then the Cardinal responded to another journalist's question, this time in English, about what he would say to adherents of the traditional Latin Mass in the U.S. and elsewhere who feel that they have been banished from their parishes since severe restrictions were placed on the old rite in response to Pope Francis' motu proprio Traditionis Custodis. Quote, this is Tobin now. Quote, I would say the experience of feeling banished is something that is sadly part of the sign of the times, not simply for the people who very much love the traditional Latin Mass. In other words, well, you know what? A lot of people feel banished, not just those crazy traddies, but also poor gay people. Actually, poor people and poor gay people. The prelate then recalled that when he was Archbishop of Indianapolis, he had to close some parishes. Yeah. Okay, so that was a hard decision, but people realized it was the best thing to do. Fast forward. For people who, this is a quote, for people who love the traditional Mass, they are still under the conditions of 2 motu proprios, as well as the decisions of the dicastery for divine worship. There are still opportunities for the traditional Latin Mass, but not perhaps what they have been accustomed to. So I know it has caused a lot of grief among people. Pause. I say this as someone who I love the traditional Latin Mass, but I do not at all love what Catholics have done with it. That being said, I'm just saying that not as a dig or to annoy people. I'm just saying that so you know where I stand. Having said that, here's what I have to say in response to this. Let me repeat. They are still under the conditions of the traditional Latin Mass. There are still opportunities to attend a TLM, but not perhaps what they have been accustomed to. So I know it has caused a lot of grief. No, my friends, it has not caused grief. That's understating it. It has caused sincere heartache. The restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass have caused heartache. Why do our eyes water and tear for the LGBTQ plus A, B minor, C flat communities and the trans community, which for some reason those are put on the same level, even though they're completely different things? Why do we tear up and cry for them? But when we push traditionalists into a corner, a very small corner, we just say, I know it's caused a lot of grief. No, it's broken hearts. I don't think it should have broken hearts. Folks, if you love the traditional Latin Mass, I have to remind you, the Mass is the Mass. The Mass is the Mass. Your nearest Novus Ordo Mass is probably not a clown Mass. You can manage. I promise you can manage. Look for Jesus in the Mass. I promise you will find him. Make him the only reason you go to Mass, and I promise you, any Mass you go to, you're going to be satisfied. The Holy Spirit will not leave you empty-handed. That having been said, I think it's a little crazy to say it's caused people a lot of grief. I know this is a press conference, I think, and I know this is off the cuff. He doesn't have time to put a lot of thought or consideration into every word he's saying. I get that. I let the guy off the hook for that. But I don't know, to use a word like grief tells me that you are really detached from the pulse of the people. I mean, you must be, because if I were to be asked that question and give an answer like this, I would never use the word grief. I would say maybe it's upset a lot of people, and that's a different thing from grief. Okay, so I know it has caused a lot of grief among people who particularly identified with that Mass, but I don't think they have been banished from the church. So again, We borrow from something that is true to legitimize something that is false. What Cardinal Tobin is saying is the Mass is the Mass is the Mass. The TLM has not been outlawed. It's just been restricted. You can still find one. And you can find a Novus Ordo Mass. He's not saying this, but I think that's kind of implicit. You know, you haven't been banished from going to Mass. It's just more difficult to go to the Mass that you want to go to. It just is what it is. I think it's safe to say that that's basically what he's trying to put forward, right? You're not being banished from the church. It's just that the Mass you want to go to is restricted. But you're not being restricted from going to Mass, just the one that you want to go to. I think it's safe to say that all of that is implied. I don't think I'm misrepresenting him. Okay, it is what it is. It is what it is, right? I know it's causing grief, but it is what it is. You can still go to Mass. It's not like you've been banished from the Mass, and it's not like you've been banished from the church. Aha. Why don't we apply that logic when we're talking about the LGBTQ ABC plus Catholics? Why don't we assign that same logic to that situation? It is what it is. I understand some of you might be living, maybe all of you, I don't know, but we can't read minds. Some of you might be living on the wrong side of church teaching, but you're not being banished from the church. The teaching is what it is. We are all called to turn away from sin and to be faithful to the gospel. If the turning away from sin part bothers you, let's pretend this is Tobin speaking. If the turn away from sin part bothers you because you don't feel what you're doing is sinful, okay, let's leave that out for now. Be faithful to the gospel. What is Jesus talking about when he says be faithful to the gospel? He's not just talking about the texts of the gospel, because when he was talking, there were no texts. He's talking about his teaching, and not only the teaching. He points back to the old covenant. Jesus didn't disqualify the commandments. He didn't disqualify truth, the truth that was revealed by God before he showed up. He makes references to it all the time. So if we just want to adhere to be faithful to the gospel, then it's important that we live what we believe. Otherwise, we're living a lie. If we say we are faithful to the gospel, but we don't live by it, then we are living a lie. If you don't want to call that a sin, call it whatever you want. But it is what it is. We're all called to the same conversion from sin and fidelity to the gospel. We are all called to that equally as sons and daughters of God. And it just is what it is. You're not banished from the church. You're not banished from the church. Come to Mass. We want to see you there. No one is going to ask you for your straight American ID card, or straight whoever you are, ID card. No one's going to ask you, I promise. But we do ask that if a Catholic is not in a state of grace, they should not present themselves for Holy Communion, but certainly come to Mass. And that's true if the Catholic is gay or straight. If they're not in a state of grace, if they're not living what they say they believe, they should not present themselves for Holy Communion. But certainly, please come to Mass. God only asks you to come to Mass once a week. He doesn't ask you to receive communion once a week. The church asks you, or not asks, requires that you receive communion once a year. You don't have to receive every week. If you're not disposed in such a way as to validly or I guess licitly receive communion every week, then don't present yourself to for communion. But please come to Mass, because it just is what it is. The teaching is what the teaching is because reality is what reality is. And we have to turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel universally, gay or straight, or B, or A, or Q. Even the plus people have to turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. And if we ever add a minus sign to that, the minus people have to turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel too. Why can't we, the logic that we apply to traditionalists, why don't we apply that? He has logic here when he's talking about traditionalists. I don't agree with how he's applying it, but the logic is correct. Traditionalists haven't been banished from the church. I think there's a lack of mercy showing here. There's a lack of mercy when we say, hey, I know it's caused you a lot of grief, but you haven't been banished from the church. Okay. Hey, I come from the old school. I can deal with that. that kind of language, that kind of rhetoric, I can deal with that. But then why don't you apply that to everybody else? And then if you're applying basically the letter of the law there, tu motu proprios, and we haven't banished you from the traditional mass, it's just restricted, and you're not being banished from the church, okay, that's letter of the law. That's basically math. Hey, 1 + 1 = 2, and 2 + 2 will always equal 4. It's basically math. It just is what it is. Okay, why not apply that to everybody else who say they feel marginalized or they feel excluded? So that's about going to do it for me. I'm going to tell you a little secret. I planned on this being like 15 minutes. I did not realize I could run my mouth quite so long. I'm the Catholic Adventurer at For the Queen BVM on X/Twitter and Catholic Adventurer on Facebook. Thank you very much for listening. Let me know how you liked it. Drop a comment. Seriously, folks, drop a comment. Tap like, drop a comment, share it, repost it, retweet it, whatever. Please. Engage a little bit, please. And definitely drop a comment because I really do want to know what you thought of this. Should I keep doing these? Did you enjoy them? Was it just kind of so-so for you? Then maybe I won't go through the trouble. Let me know. Catholic Adventurer signing out of here. May God be with you all. Bye-bye.